So I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about why it's not easy being green yet. And unlike Kermit the Frog, I'm not talking about the color of my skin, but rather sustainability. And so in particular, I'm hopefully going to tell you a little bit about why I think the liberal arts are the key to building a sustainable future. So it probably would not come as a huge surprise to anyone in here to know that society's energy demand worldwide is rising. So it's estimated that over the past 20 years, we've seen about a 50% increase in our demand. And this trend is expected to continue for another 20 years, roughly another 50% increase. So this has had many impacts on many aspects of our lives. In particular, if we think about the economy and the environment, right? From the economic side, we've all felt the impacts, right? Rising prices. So electricity, the cost of electricity is rising about 5 to 6% every year. And we're seeing similar trends in oil, which is affecting gas prices, et cetera. And even if you look at sort of little lulls in these trends, the long-term trajectories are still expecting these trends to continue to rise over the next 20 years or so. On the environmental side, sort of equally bad things, right? So the way we harvest fossil fuels and the burning of fossil fuels has caused all sorts of pollution, both to our water and our air. And the climate has committed to some level of global warming. I know this is a controversial point, and I don't want to start any trouble here today. But regardless of how you feel about it, the effects of global warming range from just a little bad to really, really disastrous. So in general, these are things we should be concerned about moving forward. So what can we do about it? How can we address some of these problems? Well, before we can really try to understand how to decrease our demand and try to fix these, we have to understand how exactly we use energy in the first place. So there's sort of two halves to this problem. On one hand, there's the generation. So for energy generation, we depend still very heavily on fossil fuels. About 83% of our energy generation still comes from fossil fuels, with about 70% coming from other sources, including renewables. They actually throw nuclear into this category and things like that. We do believe moving forward we will see an increasing use in some of these other sources as incentives are forcing people to not use fossil fuels, mainly the price. But still, right, we're still very dependent on fossil fuels. And within the fossil fuel category, there's about 9 that we actually use. And so the issue here is the fragmentation. If we wanted to try to pick one target area and one problem to focus on, it's not obvious where we should go because there's so many things going on and so many sources for our energy. It's hard to really say, well, that's the problem, that's what we should fix. So sort of the other side of the coin is energy consumption. This simple pie chart here shows you for 3 sectors: buildings, which includes residential and commercial buildings; industry, everything ranging from paper mills to data centers; and transportation, planes, trains, automobiles, et cetera, right? It's split with about half coming from buildings and then a quarter coming from the other 2 sectors. And so it's not quite as fragmented as the generation, but it's still pretty fragmented. So if we were to try to say, okay, if we really want to fix sustainability, we should really focus on this. There isn't a this, right? There's a lot of hard problems that have to be solved before we can really achieve the goal of creating a sustainable society. So what do we do? Where do we go from here? Right? So computing to the rescue, right? I'm a computer science professor. All right, so what is the role of computing in sustainability? And so this quote from the National Research Council in a report they released last year, I think sort of summarizes at least what I think. I agree with this quote. I'll leave it at that, all right? So in short, innovation in IT will play a vital role if the nation and the world are to achieve a more sustainable future. So the thing is, computers are really good at solving hard problems. In fact, that's what they're made to do, right? So sustainability problems are really hard. So the key is leveraging the computing capabilities, these advancements in technology, to try to solve some of these really hard problems, okay? So let me convince you. You may not be convinced. I'm convinced. But you may not be convinced yet of the role of computing. So let me give you one specific example that I've been thinking about to try to at least give you an idea as to how computing can actually help. I showed you a pie chart a few minutes ago about energy consumption. But if we focus rather on energy, instead of energy, electricity, you'll notice the percentages change a bit, right? So if we look at just electricity in the US, we'll see buildings are actually 76% of the overall consumption. So that actually does look like more of a target, right? That actually is a pretty big percentage. And you should note that moving forward, the prevalence of electric vehicles will not increase transportation, but rather buildings, because buildings are the ones that have to be outfitted to support charging the vehicles, right? So we actually expect that number to increase further. And that's actually a good thing, because most clean energy sources tend to be electric. Right? So in general, electricity is important, and we're okay with depending on electricity moving forward. The research I've been working on is we said, well, what can we do about this? How can we focus on electricity use in buildings? How can we make buildings smarter and greener? Let's just focus on that one little piece of sustainability and see what we can do with it. Well, to do that, we need technology, right? We need to start gathering data. Computers can solve hard problems, but they need data to work with. So where does the data come from? Well, we decided we'd build a smart home, right? And so we gathered lots of data, and I'll show you in a second some of the sensors and things we use. And then we have to figure out, well, okay, now what do we do? What do we do with all this data? We're gathering data about electricity use, we've instrumented these homes. What should we start thinking about? Well, how can we increase energy efficiency of buildings? There's an obvious answer: use less electricity, right? Not too bad. And so this seems reasonable. It turns out, though, if you rely on occupants to just do things, to just turn things off, it's not very effective, right? So I have a 2-year-old at home. His favorite book is The Lorax, and the words of The Lorax: unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not, right? So enough people just don't, right? People just don't care enough to really make big changes. And the ones who do care often will make a change for a week or two and then forget, right? We're creatures of habit. We fall back into our routines. So just relying on sort of what we call the manual approach is not going to be enough to actually reducing electricity use. What we'd like is our house to do it for us, right? We'd like our house to realize, hey, no one's home right now, but you guys left the coffee pot on. I'm going to turn it off for you, right? And appliances are getting better at this. Appliances are getting smarter and embedding more technology. But wouldn't it be great if the house, who could have all this information, not just the current conditions, but historical, right? Your house could actually say, hey, I think you're going to be home in the next hour based on what I've observed. I'm going to go ahead and turn some things on and off for you to make it nice when you come home, right? So we could almost do better if we let the house do things like that for us, right? And so that's sort of the more automatic approach, right? Use a computer to make things, to both make good decisions, help us save energy, and not sacrifice any convenience, because God forbid we try to inconvenience ourselves in any way. So maybe a less obvious answer to how we can actually increase the energy efficiency of a home or a building is to actually shift when we use electricity, right? So more and more utility companies are moving to what we call time of use pricing, which is shown on this graphic here. And that basically means they're going to charge you more for the hours of the day when everyone is using a lot of power, right? So 2:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. is what this graph shows. You know, there's some variation in the actual time slots, but that's roughly consistent, those times. So they're going to charge you a lot during those times and a little when we're all sleeping, okay? So again, if we ask the occupants, maybe we call them up on the phone, and we've actually gotten emails at Williams, right, that say, hey, during the summer, we're using a lot of power right now. Please turn off things you don't need. The problem with that is unless you're obsessive about checking your email, which I am, I must admit, right? Not everyone checks their email in real time, so that message is not going to actually have an effect. And if it's a phone call, people they're not always at home, right? So again, we want to do something more automatic. Let your house shift things for you. Run the dryer in the middle of the night. The dryer is a big source of electricity. All right, so how can we do that? Well, we said, okay, we're going to build a smart home. We actually built 3, all in Western Mass. One of them is my own house in Williamstown. And we have deployed about 100 off-the-shelf sensors. We're not building anything creative here, measuring all sorts of things, ranging from the electricity use in our house every second of the day on every circuit. We have all of our outlets are now monitored. We're gathering weather information so we can correlate outside conditions with how much power we're using, as well as indoor room temperatures. Our thermostats send messages whenever they do anything. We also installed a couple solar panels and wind turbines, but we're not actually using that to power anything right now. We're just measuring how much power we're generating. Right? So we gather about 5 million data points a day. We've been doing it for about 2.5 years, so we do have some sort of long-term analysis stuff we can work with. And so we said, okay, great. Well, now we have lots of data. Let's start to do something with it. And so we said, let's focus just on that problem I told you about shifting load, right? So let's see if we can do something to not reduce our energy consumption yet. Let's ignore that problem, but rather just shift it such that we're lowering the peak usage. So the area under our curve, in terms of how much power we're actually using, isn't going to change, but we're just going to shift things so that we're not using as much during that peak time of day. And so in this sort of simple picture here, what you see is rather than running 3 air conditioners simultaneously and using 3,000 watts of power, let's just run them serially and use only 1,000. And so now, right, that sounds simple and easy enough, but there's obviously some appliances that we can do this sort of trick for and others that we can't. So an appliance that we call interactive, right, your microwave, your TV, your light switch, we can't really schedule those. It'd be super annoying if you walked up to your microwave and tried to use it and it came back and said, sorry, right, wait 10 minutes and then we'll let you heat up your food or whatever, okay? So interactive loads, as we call them, we can't mess with. But background devices, air conditioners, even refrigerators, freezers, humidifiers, things that run and have sort of, there's an objective they must meet, but there's a little bit of wiggle room. We actually have some flexibility there, right? We can actually schedule those in a way to shift this such that we can reduce the peak without actually really inconveniencing the occupants and still meeting those objectives, okay? Again, we're just gonna make a tiny little sacrifice. And so that was basically what we set out to do. It's a simple enough algorithm. We said, let's just try this. Well, how would this work in our house? And so we looked at data over a 90-day window, and we did use the summer because I have gas heat in my house, not electric, so we thought we'd actually take advantage of the electric air conditioners. And we found that over a 90-day window, we had a 16% increase on average over all 90 days. A third of the days actually saw more than 20% increase, a maximum of about 50% improvement on certain days, and then, of course, the bad news, a few days where we did horribly, all right? And the reason is, if you have too many interactive loads, you try to make these decisions about shifting things and delaying, at some point you realize, I have to turn my refrigerator on or all my food is going to spoil. So just, I have to run it right now, okay? And those days can lead to some what we call sort of, not optimal results. But this is a very simple idea that we've already kind of shown has a lot of promise. Okay? So where do we go from here? Well, hopefully, I've only talked for a few minutes, but I've at least convinced you that computing does have some role, right? And computing and information technology and advancements in technology are clearly going to be a big part of solving these sustainability problems in the future. But, right, it's not the full answer, right? It's not just computing. You need more than that. Right? And I think this quote from that same report kind of captures this idea. A significant component of meeting virtually all sustainability challenges is to infuse computational thinking and approaches that are rich in CS and IT into the deploying industry and agencies. Sustainability problems by their very nature are cross-disciplinary, right? You can't just use computing. A computer scientist who just knows computer scientists is not going to solve the world's sustainability problems. So let's think of just one example of this. Suppose I wanted to take the same problem we were just talking about, but now add in a battery that's powered by a solar panel, right? So now we have a little bit more options, right? We can actually shift even more because we actually have this backup power that won't be pulling from the power grid, right? Which is a good thing. So to really dive into this problem and understand how it should work, we have to know a little bit about weather modeling, right? Geosciences, because we want to know how effective a solar panel would actually be. We'd like to be able to predict how much energy we'd get out of our solar panels. Battery technologies are actually a huge issue right now. They're improving, but they're still not quite there. So it'd be nice if we had a little background in maybe physics or chemistry to understand exactly what a battery is doing and how to use it in the most optimal way possible. And then it would be really great if we could actually incentivize people to make some changes. So here we can bring in sociology, psychology, understanding what people need for incentives. And then obviously there's going to be a lot of really hard equations involved. So math, statistics, economics are involved. Right? So it's just all of these problems, they're hard because they're so cross-disciplinary. So in conclusion then, what will we learn? Right? I think that's the topic I'm supposed to be talking about today. Right? So clearly everyone should take computer science. So, go home, tell your kids, tell your grandkids, everyone should take computer science. But no, more seriously, I think the takeaway message in what I'm trying to say is that sustainability is really the ultimate liberal art. It really does take this interdisciplinary knowledge, right? You have to know a little about the sciences, physics, chemistry, geosciences, computer science, math. But you also have to understand social interactions, right? Political science, history, psychology, sociology, right? Economics, right? There's our division 2. And then, of course, these are really hard problems, right? So we should also have some appreciation for sort of the way people think and human inquiry and moral reflection. And that's what we can get from the humanities and the arts. And so I think a liberal arts education is really going to be key to solving these problems, because the liberal arts education really focuses on this interdisciplinary learning style, the breadth and the depth that you really need to solve these problems. And I think Jack Sawyer would agree, at Williams, we're really good at creating problem solvers, right? That's really what we do best. And that's what we need, right? We need people who can solve these problems in a very holistic way and look at all aspects, not just the little area of expertise that they've focused on. And so, my final message is, while it isn't easy being green yet, right, I think it will be in the not too distant future, and it's our students that are going to take us to that sustainable future. That's all. Thank you.